Welcome to Monster Territory, everybody. Brought to you by the Foul Territory. I cannot speak. Brought to you by the Foul Territory Network. We're already underway in the off season, and I'm already having trouble speaking. How's everybody doing? How do you like the new intro? We worked on the new intro all day today, though actually the last couple of days, but got to freshen things up for the off season. Hope you all like it. But everybody, welcome. I guess you could say this is the first off-season stream. We're not really in the off-season yet. Obviously, we're in the middle of the postseason. I believe the Dodgers just wrapped things up against the Phillies not too long ago. I think the Mariners and the Tigers, they are playing tonight. And here we are talking about the off-season. But we had some news for today. Craig Breslow, Sam Kennedy, Alex Cora at the podium today, taking questions, talking about the Red Sox in 2025 and the 2026 offseason. And, as usual, they're not really going to give you a whole lot to really dive into, to chew into. You're going to have to try and read in between the lines as much as you can whenever Craig talks. Sam Kennedy as well, right? Cora, he mentioned a couple of things about the Red Sox in 2025, talked about the postseason as well. But I think we got a lot here to dive into to kind of try to dissect as much as we can. And I got my thoughts, I got my ideas, and of course, ideas and thoughts can change every day, every night. I could wake up feeling differently about something. I could be thinking here right now, okay, we need to go get this guy, this player. They gotta be the main targets. But then I could wake up in a couple of days and be like, you know what? There's also this guy over here, right? So that's the off season for you. It's always fluid. Anytime you got 29 other teams involved, things can happen rather quickly. Things can change rather rapidly. And that's the offseason for you. But that's part of why I like it, right? It's just it's very fluid, very dynamic. But for the Red Sox, they got a big offseason ahead. Obviously, we had a sad ending here. We're done really talking about 25, right? Unless you're bringing up areas that you need to improve. So we're going to start getting our focus towards this offseason, and I'm excited for it. Like I said, a lot of comments here today from Craig, Sam Kennedy, Cora, but we also have an article from Pete Abraham. We'll dive into that a little bit. I'll give you my thoughts on that. Mark Feinsand, he actually had an article in the last couple of days. I didn't really touch on it very much, but we'll look at that as well. But everybody, if you can, hit the like button for me. Subscribe if you're new to Monster Territory. We're trying to get to 5K. I think we can get to 5K by the end of the postseason. I know we're not in the postseason, but I think we could still maybe get there. We're still going to be doing a few shows per week until the end of the postseason and obviously throughout the offseason. Most likely in the offseason, we're going to be pretty busy, with all the rumors and whatnot flying around. Usually, I'll say this, in the offseason, Sundays through Thursdays, that tends to be the sweet spot for the offseason, right? Fridays and Saturdays, they tend to be a bit more quiet. Sometimes you'll have something happen, and I'll go live for that. But expect the schedule more so from Sunday through Thursday, right? But let's get to it, everybody. Let's get to it. Hope everyone had a good start to their week. Happy Monday. It is Monday, right? Happy Monday, everybody. I've been working too much today. I don't even know what day it is. But let's get to it here. Let's get to it. Let's dive into... we got to start right away with the press conference, right? We got the press conference here today. First off, Craig... he was kind of reflecting on the 2025 season, right? Said they're heading in the right direction. This is a group. It was a good group this year. Cora touched on that as well. And there were a lot of good things about this team. But he also talked about areas that do need to be improved as well. But when asked about what he had learned, what Craig Breslow had learned this past season, he said this: I learned a lot. Every time there's a decision to be made, there's also an opportunity to learn about each other, to learn about the rest of the baseball operations group, to learn about myself. And I'm constantly kind of reliving those decisions to make sure not necessarily that the outcome was right. That can be really difficult to predict, but that we had a good decision-making process, that we had the information that was necessary to make the best decisions possible. I learned a lot about the value of building relationships and having clear communication and spending time with the coaching staff and spending time with the players and certainly with Alex and having honest conversations, uncomfortable as they may be at times. So I think the short answer there is I've learned a ton. This is still, obviously last year he was in the fold, but 2024 was more of an evaluation year, right? This was the first step forward under Craig Breslow. And, at the end of the day, it's his second year leading a front office, right? It's very natural, even though, he played a lot, obviously, in the major leagues, right? Had a longer career. This is new for him, obviously. So there's going to be some things along the way. And then that's something we had heard with Craig where, communication seems to be a bit iffy. There's that whole, the stiff comment or whatever it was from a former front office executive as well. But Breslow, I would say, over the last couple of months, you have been seeing him a bit more active, right? He was at the field a little bit more, talking with people a little bit more. Of course, he would go back into his burrow, right? But I did notice a bit of a difference there. But Craig, seems like he's got a better handle on things. And he was asked as well about, looking back at the Raffy trade. I think about this from a baseball perspective, and that is trying to build this athletic, dynamic team and giving ourselves and the baseball operation as much flexibility as we possibly can to do that. What I have seen as a player and what I've seen over the last couple of years is that this ownership group, when there is a chance to build a winner and a team that can contend for the postseason, resources aren't a problem. And I think we've talked a lot about how this window of contention is upon us. That was a follow-up to a question, or that was an answer to a question about clearing Raffy's contract off of the payroll. And, do they plan to try to utilize that for this coming offseason? So that's what he meant by, there's a chance to build a winner, resources on a problem, right? Looking back, you can't, someone brought up Raffy and he just kind of smiled, right? Because the whole thing was just a mess, right? And in a way, I think it's actually good for him. Say what you will about the Raffy trade, say what you will about Craig, but I mean that's some pretty good experience to go through early on in your early career as a president of baseball operations, right? Having to go through drama like that, especially in a town that is very rich with the media, right? And so I'd have to say that's a pretty good learning experience, and they came out of it alive at the end of the day, right? In the end, you go back to the Raffy trade. He said he believed that this was a team that would have more wins without Raffy, right? Not a knock against Raffy, but more so because of the team that they had, the flexibility that they had at that point. So, yeah. It is what it is, and I'm interested to see how he moves going forward. Kind of going back here to, or I guess taking a step forward here, this is where they started to kind of dive into the questions of this coming offseason, right? Sam Kennedy gave a couple of comments saying he was very proud, right? Cora, saying pretty much the same things, obviously. And we should all be proud of the 2025 Red Sox, right? They did a lot of good things this year. Came up short, but we should all definitely be proud of this team. But the offseason obviously was a hot point here. In a window of contention, urgency is needed. That was a big focus of Breslow in this conference, from this press conference as well. He said they're going to look to improve the team via free agency and trade. He did mention pitching, right? That was an emphasis there, and building a rotation, right? He talked about Garrett Crochet, how obviously the great year that he had, and saying, it's kind of hard to really just get a whole ton of Garrett Crochets, right? That's why you got to do well with your development. But they also have to be aggressive this coming offseason. And Joe Ryan, Dylan Cease, right? Let's talk about the pitching. I mean, we all know the guys that are going to be out there. Joe Ryan's the main target when it comes, to the trade market. I'd also say Sandy Alcantara in there. You got to remember here, with the Red Sox this coming offseason, they're going to have competition. They are going to have other teams getting into the mix, especially for a guy like Ryan. I mean, I'm looking at the Mets. I'm looking at the Mets to make a big move when it comes to this offseason, because you saw, yes, even though they do have a lot of good young pitching coming up the pipe, McLean, Tong, Sproat, right? They all came up there. They ended up still falling short, but they really lacked the depth on the pitching staff, and the bullpen was getting taxed. I fully expect the Mets to go out there this coming offseason and go make a move. They got prospects they can move. Like I said, you got 3 pitchers there. Could you maybe deal one of those guys, right? Would the Twins want to get an arm back in return? Yeah, I think that's very possible, right? The Red Sox, they can make a move, but will they have to give up someone like Peyton Tolley or a Connolly early, guys that showed you a lot of good things? So I could see the Red Sox and the Mets going head-to-head for a guy like Joe Ryan. And then you could see Sandy Alcantara being a fallback. The Marlins, hey, they're about to, we were all thinking, the Marlins are probably a couple of years away, but they showed some good things, right? They knocked the Mets out on the final day. They are a little further ahead than we all thought. Could the Marlins, maybe look to, make a move this coming offseason for Sandy? Or would they maybe rather hang on to him? Man, we'll see. Obviously, if you make a good offer, then anything can happen. But if you were to make a trade for Sandy, if they were motivated to move him, I wonder if the Red Sox could be a good trade partner, right? Could they, could you maybe do something, might sound crazy. We'll talk about Jarren Duran, Willie Abreu, but if the Marlins were to look to add some bats, could maybe one of those guys be on the table, right, in a possible trade? Same thing with Joe Ryan, I think either one of Duran or Willier could be a guy that you send back for either of those pitchers, right? And Alcantara, he looked very good in the second half. And then, if the trade market isn't the way, then, yeah, Dylan Cease. I think Dylan Cease is going to be that's a name we're going to hear about, I think. Scott Boras, yeah, but hey, you got the Scott Boras connection with Bregman. But you know how Boras is. He's going to look for a big payday. You got Framber out there. He had the whole thing with the Astros, with their catcher this year, the cross-up situation. I don't know. I just wonder about his market in general. There's going to be Ranger Suarez. You'll have a couple of guys on the market. But I do think Joe Ryan, Sandy are going to be the top 2 targets on the trade market for them. And I think Cease will be the other guy. And I will see what they end up doing. I do expect the Red Sox to land a guy behind Crochet. It's very obvious. It needs to happen. You saw the gap between Crochet and Giolito Bayo. I've said it all year. Giolito Bayo, I was saying it since the beginning of the year. Once you saw them get going a little bit, I said they're like a 3-4 in the rotation. It's not like that's rocket science, right? We all saw it. They needed a 2, and yeah, sure, the offense came up short in the postseason, but you kind of wonder if maybe things could have gone a little differently if they had gotten a longer start than what Bayo gave you in game 2. You wonder. But I definitely expect the Red Sox to land someone. Who that ends up being, I don't know, right? I think we all hope it's going to be Ryan. I think a lot of us would be okay with Sandy. I think Cease, I could see people groaning at that because they're going to look at the ERA. But here's the thing with Cease. The reason the Red Sox have shown interest in him in the past is the Red Sox, when it comes to their pitching philosophy, they are very big on velo and swing and miss. Those are the 2 attributes they really look for. And with Cease, obviously, he's going to have the secondaries to go along with it. He had the highest strikeout per nine rate this past season. So that's why they have shown interest in him, because he fits their profile of what they look for. So we'll see. We will see on that. We will see. Let's see what you all are saying here in the chat. Who do we got here in the chat? We got Brett. We got Nick. George, how we doing? Mark. Moose, what's going on? Jennifer, how we doing? Brett, hello, hello. FYB. Joe, what's going on? How we doing, everybody? Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining tonight. And let's kind of get going. Let's move a little forward here. Let's move a little forward. There were definitely more questions about the offseason. And the offense got brought up as well, right? I just mentioned that was something here for this past postseason. The bats came up short. They couldn't do anything. When asked about the offense in the postseason, Greg said, it would be fair to look at some of those other teams still competing in the playoffs and say that they hit the ball out of the ballpark a little more than we do, scoring runs. This is kind of a zero-sum game, right? And it doesn't really matter how you score. But in the postseason, a lot of runs come via the home run because the pitching is so dominant. So I think that's a consideration. Well, all eyes are going to be turning to Kyle Schwarber and Pete Alonso. Those are the two big bats. I would not be surprised at all if the Red Sox ended up with one of them. Now, with Schwarber, you got to think with Schwarber, the Phillies, they are absolutely a strong contender to keep him around. He's enjoyed his time there. He just fits, He's just a good fit there, both from a performance standpoint, good ballpark for him. Obviously, we've seen it. And just a clubhouse leader, right? I think he just fits well in Philly. I would not be surprised at all if he ends up staying there, get a long-term deal done, whatever it may be. You never know, though. Money talks, right? I mean, the Phillies, they're down 2-0 now. Schwarber, will he be motivated to go elsewhere? I don't know. I think at the end of the day, with him, what's it going to be? Is he looking for big payday to end his career? Good contract to end his career? Or is he looking to win? Well, the Phillies, they could definitely give him both of those things. Obviously, if they come up short against the Dodgers, that's going to sting. There'll be another exit in the division round back-to-back years. So it's going to be interesting. And the Phillies, we've gotten reports over the last month or so that they're going to be aggressive. I think Bob Nightingale said enough of the hoopla about Schwarber going elsewhere. He's going to stay with the Phillies. They're going to do whatever they can to keep him around. But could another team come in, not even just the Red Sox, could other teams out there maybe come in and throw the bag and all of a sudden start making the Phillies a bit uncomfortable? Well, we'll see. But I think because he's been there, it's a good fit. I would say it's more likely he ends up staying. Would be cool to have him come back to Boston. But this is where I have my eyes turning towards Pete Alonso. I think Pete Alonso is very interesting. He's already got the nickname. He just sounds like a fan favorite in Boston, right? He's got the polar bear name. People are going to love that. People are going to eat that up in Boston, man. All right, but while we love nicknames and all that, right? The War Pig. Could you imagine the War Pig and the polar bear on the same team? Goodness gracious. Man, oh man. All the nicknames. But the performance is what we're going to be looking at, right? Pete Alonso, obviously we know what he brings to the table. He's going to bring you a lot of power from the right side. Perfect fit at Fenway Park. With the monster, he is close to a 600 slugging in his career at Fenway Park. But another factor, right? And I see you in the chat. Nick, 15th in home runs this year, not good. Yeah, the Red Sox, they were very middle of the road. And of course, you could maybe try to get a boost of power. All right, Bregman obviously ended up fading a little bit in the second half, or at least the power and the impact bat faded. He was still getting on base for the most part. Roman, I would imagine he's going to get a bit more thump. So I think you're going to see the power still be, at least as of right now, if you went with the status quo heading into the next season, I would think you're going to be still at least around the same. But that's not going to cut it, right? You need to add a little bit more. And Alonso is absolutely going to add that. But what he's also going to bring to the table is runners in scoring position. This guy was very good with runners in scoring position this year. Let me actually, I posted the numbers here today on my Twitter account. I still call it Twitter. Is that just me? I'm still a Twitter guy. But I posted the numbers here today. This year, with runners in scoring position, Pete Alonso hit 309 with a 1.035 OPS, a 176 WRC plus, 14 homers, and he mostly batted in the third and fourth spots in the lineup, where Schwarber, he mixed around a little bit more, right? Schwarber, he did bat fourth, he batted third a little bit, but he mostly batted second this year. That's not really a big deal, but with the Red Sox this year, a lot of their issues came in the middle. They were 20th in WRC plus in the third and fourth spots in the lineup. And in those spots, they were 17th in runners in scoring position. So that's where Pete Alonso, obviously he's going to bring the power, but he brings that ability to drive in runs and come up in big spots, right? He's good in those high leverage situations. And with Alonso, I think he fits in this team pretty well. Like with Schwarber, you got to kind of figure out, obviously, you got to figure out anyway what's going to be happening with Massa. He looked good in September. Obviously, he came up big in game one. It's weird with Massa, man. Like, I was dead set that he was probably going to be elsewhere in 2026, but I don't know. I mean, I think that could go either way. The Red Sox, they're looking for, we saw it with Rafi, right? They want flexibility. Right, they want to have that team where they can mix and match and they can move guys around. With Massa, I just can't help but wonder, if the Red Sox, could he play some more outfield? Yeah, sure. I mean, I would imagine if he ends up sticking around next year, the arm, it's going to be further away from the surgery that he had. So, yeah, I think you could play a little bit more in the outfield, but is it going to be enough for what the Red Sox are going to want? I'm just curious about that. I'm very curious. But with first base, I think that opens up more possibilities right there, right? You got to figure out what's going on with Nathaniel Lowe. I actually saw one article today saying he's going to be a free agent. I'm like, no, he's not going to be a free agent. He has another year of arbitration. So, no, he's in the fold for next year. But, moves can be made, obviously. Do they decide they want to move on? Whatever it may be. I don't know, right? Tristan Casas, this was talked about here today as well. And people, I noticed this in the media. It's so obvious when some reporters out there, they try to get a headline. All right, they try to get like a nice clickbaity headline. And the headline here was, the Red Sox wouldn't commit to Tristan Casas for 2026 at first base. Well, obviously they're not going to commit to him. The guy, his knee exploded. Of course they're not going to commit to him. It's like, come on. Like, I get it. Like, I know, but man, I don't know. I don't get that. But Casas, yeah, obviously, Craig did say he is looking good. He's working out. But he mentioned that he's missed a lot of time, but has also seen what he's capable of. So, sounded like to me, there's really no rush on anything with Casas at this point. They're not, rushing to get him back into the lineup. They're not rushing to trade him. It's kind of just, it is what it is, and you just wait for him to come back, right? And the way it sounded like he's doing really well. So, we'll see. Either way, if you're looking at a trade, he has no value right now. He has no trade value. Unless if a team really saw some potential. Oh, no, he's going to be good. We think we can tap into that bat. I don't know. I just don't see how he has any trade value at this point. However, this is where I can look at Alonso, and I think it makes there's a good amount of sense in trying to bring him in, because he can go between first base, DH, and you could actually argue that maybe DH is probably a better fit for him, because the defense, it's not very good at first base. Now, what you could do, if you do hang on to Nathaniel Lowe, and it seemed like he fit in with the clubhouse, obviously he was productive after coming to Boston, But you got to remember with Nathaniel Lowe, he's a good defender. I know you're going to roll your eyes at that because of the error that happened in Game 3. I know. But for the most part in his career, he has been a good defender. What you could do is Alonso, he could be that DH. And then Nathaniel Lowe, you keep his better defense at first base. Alonso could be the DH. Lowe would be a first baseman versus right-handers. And then against left-handers, Alonso could play first. And then you just have a right-handed hitter against the lefties, right? So he kind of has that flexibility and that right-handed bat where it can actually work in the Red Sox favor. So whereas if you just bring in Schwarber, I mean, you already just have like so many lefties as it is. Obviously, I wouldn't be upset at all if they signed Schwarber, but with Alonso, you can kind of play those matchups a bit more, you know? And yeah, obviously you still can with Schwarber, but I like that you could have that dynamic at first base where him and Lowe can go back and forth if you end up keeping Lowe. And on top of that, if you have those guys taking care of first base for 2026, Casas does not have to rush back. I know a lot. I see both sides when it comes to keeping Casas, trading Casas, whatever it may be. Whatever it is, you wouldn't have to rush him back, right? He can kind of take his time. He can rehab, go to Worcester whenever he's ready to play, and kind of just build himself back up. Who knows? Maybe he ends up coming back late next year, second half. Kind of does what Christian Campbell did, stays at AAA for the second half, and then Nathaniel Lowe, he's going to be a free agent after this coming year, and then Casas would be ready for 2027. And, him and Alonso can now be the righty-lefty taking care of first base and DH. So I think there's benefits with Alonso here in a multitude of ways. The platoons, I'm not saying he's a platoon hitter, but you can work those righty-lefties, and then Casas doesn't have to come back quickly. So I think there's benefit. I would love to see Pete Alonso at Fenway Park. But everybody, on NESN, I do have to wrap it up right there. If you want to see the rest of the comments, we do have a few more things to dive into here. Come on over to YouTube, Monster Territory, and see what else I got to say. But NESN viewers, thank you for watching here tonight, and we'll be back a couple of days. I'm looking at Monday, Wednesday, Friday for this coming week. Probably for the next few weeks, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, until the postseason's over. And then at that point, things open up a little bit more. But I'll be back here Wednesday, unless we have something breaking tomorrow, which I don't imagine it will. But we'll see you Wednesday most likely. But on NESN, thank you, and we'll see you next time. So let's get to the rest of this. But yeah, Pete Alonso, I would love it. Makes perfect sense. And another interesting thing about Alonso, let me actually pull this up here. And on Statcast, I always take a look at the expected home runs, especially at Fenway Park. Because you got to remember with Fenway, the monster comes into play, right? But what's actually encouraging to me, because you'll see a lot of times where a guy will have a lot of home runs, but then you look at the expected home runs for Fenway Park, and they actually go down because of the monster, right? Because of obviously the height of the monster. It ends up, going off the wall instead of over it. But what's encouraging is that his 38 home runs this year would still be an expected 37 at Fenway Park. I know that this might sound obvious, but there are players where their expected home runs go way down at Fenway Park. But that to me, get a little bit more of a long shangle in there, get a bit more loft. And I mean, this guy could maybe be a 45, 50 homer bat at Fenway Park. And I think for someone like Pete Alonso, who loves to hit dingers, I mean, obviously the money is going to be the big thing, but you got to think with him, he might find the possibility of playing at Fenway Park quite intriguing. Obviously, he's been in the Northeast his whole career playing with the Mets, so he knows the environment, obviously. So I could see the Red Sox being intriguing for him if they are interested. Again, we haven't even seen any report if they plan on making a run or anything. I think if there is one, it's probably more speculation. It sounds obvious, but you got to wonder with Alonso, I mean, what's the contract that he's going to look for? I think personally, Boris is probably going to look at least in the $25 to $30 million range. He's a first baseman. He's about to turn 31. So, but you think for maybe Alonso too, maybe Fenway Park, his bat would actually age pretty well there because obviously of the right-handed power. So, that could be a good place for him to go. You kind of talked about that with Bregman, how his swing fit perfectly. With Alonso, let's actually take a look here. When it came to his pull percentage, looking at the batted ball data. And he pulled, we're in his career. Let's actually go to his career splits. In his career, he has pulled, I am losing it. I can't find it. I swear I just had it. Hold on one second. I just had this. I see this here. Well, in his career, it looks okay. I think I'm seeing it. Fly ball, 28% pull, and then he's 46% to center, and then Oppo, 66% with his fly balls. But when it comes to him, I think it's obvious. And also we got this too. His splits when he pulls. He has a slugging of 793, an OPS of 1144. So, yeah. I mean, obviously, you all know he would fit at Fenway Park, but the numbers back that up as well. I would like Alonso. I think it would make a lot of sense. Just works in so many ways. Now, when it comes to the rotation, let's talk about the rotation. I know I already touched on it a little bit. They need to get a number 2. That's very obvious. They need to do that. I can't help but wonder, though. I'll say it one more time. I can't help but wonder if they had their shot at Ryan at the deadline, and maybe is it going to end up being one of those situations where maybe you should have done it at the deadline, and then another team is going to swoop in the offseason, right? And they're going to end up missing their chance. I hope not, because I think he's perfect here. He just fits that perfect number 2 perfectly. And I almost kind of wonder, I don't know. I think Joe Ryan, I think he seems for the most part to be a pretty calm and collected guy when he's on the mound. And Dylan Cease, we saw a couple of times, or a few times actually this past season where, he got lit up a little bit. And I wonder how he would do in Boston. I wonder if that's something that would come into play when it comes to signing him. I don't know. I just kind of wonder about that because I always think of the personality with a guy, right? How are they going to fit, in a big market like the Reds, like Boston here? We'll see. I don't know. Joe Ryan kind of gives me those vibes where I think he would handle it pretty well. Cease, I'm not quite sure. I'm not saying Cease would not handle it, but it's a factor, Something to think about. Either one of those guys I think would be good. Sandy, I think would make a lot of sense as well. We'll see how it goes. But when it comes to a trade, we've talked about this a million times, but you have a couple of major league guys, Jaron Duran and Willier. You got some and then obviously, you got some good pitching prospects at the top of your system. I would hate to part with Tolley or Early, but you can't help but wonder if one of those guys might have to be on the table. I don't know. You got a lot of other good position player prospects as well besides, Willier and Duran at the major league level. You got guys like Arias down there. The password, Stinson, he's there. I wonder if he's still going to be with the Red Sox organization next offseason. I think he could be a perfect trade candidate. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Even someone like Mikey Romero. The Red Sox have had their issues at second base. That's another thing they got. That's something else Craig touched on as well when it came to the defense. I don't know. Could Mikey Romero end up having a path at some point? I'm not sure. But they have guys. They can work out a deal. Speaking of Duran and Willier, that was also something that they touched on. Was asked about the 4 outfielders, right? The surplus of outfielders. Craig simply said, Cora said that, he can make it work. He'll make it work, whatever they give him. And Craig also touched on the fact that ended up helping them out, in the second half because Roman going down. But he did emphasize that they need to do what's best for 2026, and everything is on the table. That kind of tells me. There's also another player I'm going to talk about in a little bit. He's going to be part of this conversation as well. I'll bring him up in a minute. But man, you got to think one of those guys is going to get moved. They have good value, years of control. They're talented players. They're the perfect guys that you could look to move. I would imagine it would be Duran over Willier at this point because and that's another thing, kind of reading between the lines. The Red Sox talking about adding power. Willier is going to give you more of that power. Duran, he'll get into it, here and there, but he's not really, obviously, he's not that big power threat. And obviously he struggled in that series against the Yankees. That kind of tells me maybe Duran's on the table. Again, I think you maybe could figure out something for Ryan or Sandy in either or. I'm looking at the Padres and the Dodgers out west. The Padres, maybe not so much. I would actually look for the Padres more so in the free agent market. They've got their ownership situation figured out. They haven't spent really a ton in the last couple of years. They brought in Pivetta last year, but they don't have a lot really to trade right now. So I think the Padres might look to free agency. I don't know if they would be able to pull off a deal for Duran. The Dodgers, I think, could be interesting. Conforto is going to be a free agent. What's going to happen with Kyle Tucker? They have been linked with him. Stephen Kwan, they were linked with him at the deadline. So the Dodgers, I think, could be intriguing. The Mariners, I wonder about the Mariners. We always talk about the pitching, right? We'll see what ends up happening with the Mariners. They have not wanted to give up any of their pitchers in the last couple of years. What they could do is you could move Randy Rosarena to DH, and then Duran, he could be your left fielder. So maybe something could be had there. The Reds need bats. I think Duran could actually be pretty interesting at Great American Ballpark. They got guys, right? They got some guys there. Andrew Abbott, Nick Lodolo. I wonder if that could be a possible avenue. The Royals, the Pirates. I'm not sure what would be very intriguing for the Red Sox to get back. I don't know. You're probably not getting Bubba Chandler back for the Pirates. That's probably a no. But they need bats, right? So there's a lot of ways for the Red Sox to go here when it comes to moving either of those guys. So, like I always say, we're just going to have to wait and see. Before I go any further, everybody, we've talked a lot here about all the comments so far, but we do have a couple of sponsors tonight helping fund the show, keeping the lights on. Let's go talk about one of them.
FT fam, another reason why you should love Arena Club is the grading system. So you recently pulled a slab pack and then you said, hey, it's not graded. Grade it for me. They gave you an 8.5 out of 10 on your auto Whitey Ford card. And then they show you all the details of the grading system. It's very interactive within the app. And then you're done. If you want to sell the card or you want to know what it's worth, you've got it.
It's like getting taken to school on cards. And I think that's the coolest part of it. If you're young or old, you understand, hey, this is how it gets deciphered all the way through. It shows you the numbers and how they went through it. I think that's the coolest part about this whole thing. And then you can keep it traded or sell it, do whatever you want.
And it's so much more efficient to do this through Arena Club. Whether you're ripping a pack, there's the slab packs, buying a card, selling a card, grading a card. It's all there for you. We talk about it all season long. arenaclub.com/FOUL is where you can go to give it a shot. 20% off your first card purchase. arenaclub.com/FOUL. Use the code FOUL at checkout and get 20% off.
Alrighty, let's get to it here. Couple of things here in the chat. Duran with his speed not going anywhere, says Mason. Well, again, kind of got to touch on the, again, they were emphasizing the power at the press conference there today. And Roman's going to be your leadoff guy. So is Duran going to fit the bill when it comes to what they're looking for in the middle of the order? He could, right? I mean, I could definitely see a world where Duran stays, of course. It's just going to come down to what do the Red Sox envision for 2026. I don't know. A couple other things. Carlos Narvaez. He's going to have meniscus surgery. He's been dealing with a bum knee. And you kind of saw Narvaez there in the second half. Wasn't looking amazing. He had a couple of dingers, right? Came up in some spots, but you could tell he wasn't looking the same as what he did in the first half, right? And of course, it's rookie season, first year, a lot of wear and tear, but that's something to keep an eye on, right? A meniscus issue, right, for a catcher at this point, and he's on the younger side. I wonder if that could be a bit of an issue moving forward. Something that could end up just being just a pain in the butt, Got to keep an eye on that, right? Especially for a younger catcher. I hope that ends up not being an issue. But you wonder if maybe the Red Sox could another option at catcher. Not to replace Narvaez, but to go with him. Is Connor Wong going to be the guy, their other catcher? I know Connor Wong, he's very good to have behind the scenes, right? He's good with the pitching staff. I don't know. I wonder if the Red Sox look for more production to help out with Narvaez. That could be something to pay attention to. I don't know. Just making sure I'm not missing anything. He was asked about Bregman and Story, but he's not really going to be able to say much on that. He basically said, they have their own decisions to make because they have the opt-outs. He did say Bregman seemed to love his time in Boston. You've all heard me a million times. I think he's going to end up staying. If he ends up going elsewhere, then I'm going to have to eat my words a lot. But it's possible, right? Anything's possible. But we all saw it, right? It just seemed to be a good fit. I think they'll eventually come to terms on something. Story, the more I think about it, I have left open the possibility that he could opt out. I do wonder, though, I just wonder if his agent would want to risk it, whereas if they stay in Boston for a couple more years, have a couple more good seasons, then you can go out. He's going to be, close to 35 when he goes back out to free agency in a couple of years. But now that he's healthy, he's got a full year of health under his belt. Could that be, something where he probably needs to build up a bit more, right, to prove to other teams that, he's not going to get hurt all the time. So I think there's a good chance he ends up staying. It is still a good amount of money left, right? A couple of years at 50. I have speculated about, well, if him and his agent feel like they could get a 3 or 4 year deal, then maybe. But is it going to be enough to draw him away from 2 years, 50 to stay with the Red Sox? I don't know. He's also, like Bregman, he's also a good fit. Obviously, he was good this year, besides May, one of the clubhouse leaders. I think it makes a lot of sense for Story to stay. With me, I'm always going to speculate about a whole bunch of possibilities, right? You never know what could happen. So that's why I always leave the door open for every possibility. The more I think about it, I feel like Story's probably he's going to opt back in. He'll stay. We'll see. But yeah, he couldn't really talk much about those guys. I think that's pretty much all the important things. Talked about power. Talked about beefing up the rotation. Those are the important things. So we know what is on the agenda for this offseason. Let's see what they end up doing. So let's get to the Pete Abraham article. And I found this interesting. It sounded more like speculation from Pete Abraham. Really? I mean, that's kind of the way I read it. Didn't sound like there was any sort of a source going into anything. He said here, Craig Breslow did what was necessary last winter and traded 4 of the Red Sox best prospects to the White Sox to land left-hander Garrett Crochet. It was a franchise-altering transaction, one that signaled the Red Sox were back in the business of contending after 3 seasons of rebuilding. Then he goes on to say, but Breslow should remain bold, even after getting back to the postseason. He said here, outside of Crochet and Roman Anthony, every player in the organization should be on the table to swing trades that would improve the rotation and add power to the lineup. Add Carlos Narvaez to that list because it's difficult to find a good defensive catcher who can also add to the offense. He talked about Aroldis Chapman probably not going anywhere because they just signed him. So then he goes on to name these guys: Wilyer Abreu, Jarren Duran, Marcelo Meyer, Sadam Rafaela cannot be untouchable. The same has to be true of Connolly Early, Peyton Tolley, and any other young pitcher if it means bringing back a legit number 2 with strikeout stuff and the ability to work deep into games. Well, I'm going to disagree with Sadam right there. No, Sadam is, in my opinion, pretty much untouchable. You don't move him. Just like he said with Narvaez, it's also hard to find a good defensive center fielder that can also contribute to the lineup. Up the middle defense is very valued. Sadam is arguably the best center fielder in all of Major League Baseball. You don't just trade that away, right? And along with what he was able to do in clutch spots. So I disagree with Abraham there. However, yes, of course, Wilyer, Jarren. He mentioned, the prospects, even Connolly Early, Peyton Tolley. I find the Marcelo Meyer one to be intriguing. And I'm going to be honest with all of you. And some people, they might think I'm crazy for saying this, but I do wonder if he could maybe come up in talks. And the only reason I wonder about that is because I've been speculating about this. I'm like, well, what's going to happen with Christian Campbell? I mean, if Story opts back in, right? Obviously, Bregman too, that also comes into play. But if Story ends up coming back, I don't know. I just wonder, yes, I would like to have Marcelo Meyer at second base. I think he would be perfect there because they do need to improve the defense there. But I just wonder what happens with Campbell. I know they're high on him, obviously. They signed him to a long-term deal. They see him more so as a second baseman moving forward. I think you could also maybe say left field, possibly. But that's probably it. And I just wonder with Meyer, I wonder if he could be a possibility. I think back to 2005. Hanley Ramirez, they called him up for a couple of games at the end of the season. Meyer's different, obviously. He got called up way earlier. But I just wonder about that. They ended up moving Hanley, top shortstop prospect in the game at the time. They ended up moving him for Josh Beckett. That's different. He's an ace. They're looking for a 2 here. You got to remember that, they still had Schilling at the time too, But in this, I just wonder about Meyer, Yes, he would be great defensively there, but I just wonder, and then they also got these other guys coming up. I already mentioned Mikey Romero. Franklin Arias had another good season this year. He's good defensively, brings speed. And Nick, I see you in the chat. Meyer is better defensively, and that's another thing to think about as well. Here's the problem with that, though. And I agree. The numbers do say Trevor Story he was not good defensively. You more so saw the problems in September. And that's where I wonder if maybe some fatigue. He hadn't played a full season in 3 years, So I just wonder, would they prefer to go that route where Marcelo Meyer plays short? You got to remember, though, there's a human aspect to it, and there's seniority there, right? Obviously, we saw Derek Jeter play shortstop for the Yankees for years. It was very clear that Derek Jeter was not a good defensive shortstop, but he ended up staying at shortstop for his whole career. You know, it's kind of just one of those things. I agree, numbers-wise, Trevor Story probably needs to play second base, but will they make that move? Will they actually do it? I think if they went to him and said, hey, you know, we're kind of looking at the numbers, you know, might be a better fit at second base. Would you want to do it? I think he would be open to it. So, again, there's more things that come into play there. You can't just make the switch. There has to be a conversation, you know. I think Story, though, if he was approached with the idea, he's a team player, I think he would do whatever the team wanted him to do. Right? So I'm not really worried about that. And yeah, I agree. Marcelo Meyer at shortstop? Yeah, absolutely. I'm not talking about what I want. I'm more talking about what I wonder what the Red Sox could do. How they think about it. If Meyer comes up in a trade to acquire someone like Joe Ryan, if the Twins are dead set on getting him, do you do it? I don't know. I just don't know what the Red Sox think with that. We'll see. But I do find his name here listed very intriguing. You know, another thing with Meyer too. And again, not a knock on him. However, since coming into the Red Sox organization after that draft, he's had a hard time staying healthy. That's something where he has got to figure that out to improve that durability. Last year he had the back issue. This year it was the wrist. A couple of years ago, or a few years ago, I can't remember what it was. But he's had durability issues. And I wonder, again, not what I want. If it were me, I'd like to keep Marcelo Meyer here. But I wonder what their perspective is. The fact that he hasn't been able to stay healthy, they need a 2. If a team out there sees potential with Meyer, like we all do, then who knows? Maybe that could end up being something. And it's not like the Red Sox don't have any other middle infielders in their system. I mean, they got, again, Romero, Arias, Campbell, you know, so something to think about. And that's, again, and I'm going to go back to the comment that Breslow made. All options need to be on the table. Can't help but wonder. Could even a guy like Marcelo Meyer be included in talks? We'll see. But I believe we have a couple of voicemails. I'm going to get to those in just a little bit. I already touched on the Feinstein. You know, let me touch on the Feinstein article here really quick. Will Bregman opt out or return to the Red Sox? This was a few days ago. He pretty much said in this article it's a guarantee he's going to opt out. And yeah, I think he should. I think he should opt out, right? We all saw the way he was playing before he went down with the quad injury. I think there's a chance he could still opt in. But it's probably more likely he wants to get a long-term deal. Again, I think it's going to happen with the Red Sox. I'll eat my words if he ends up going elsewhere, but I feel confident with that. I'd be stunned if he went somewhere, to be honest. You know? Because I also think about it, too, with the quad injury, does that actually work in the Red Sox favor? Would a team like the Tigers, who were aggressive for him last offseason, would they make a same offer, especially after the quad injury, and it did affect his performance in the second half? I don't know. I don't think the Tigers would be as aggressive as they were last offseason. I don't know. The Yankees, probably not. I mean, they got Ryan McMahon. The Mariners, I mean, they're going to be looking for help, but they don't really spend. The Cubs, you know, Matt Shaw just had his first full year. So I don't know. I feel like in the end, this probably works out in the Red Sox favor. So that's just me. I think he stays. But that is something Feinstein talked about. Before we do get to, I'm going to check the voicemails here. We do have one more word from one of our friendly sponsors tonight. I'll be right back. October baseball is here, and the pressure's on, the lights are brighter, and with DraftKings Sportsbook, you're right there in the middle of every moonshot moment. Live in-game betting and odds that can change as fast as a ball is flying over the fence. New customers bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. So go ahead and download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FOUL. That's code FOUL to turn $5 into $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, fees may apply in Illinois. 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bet must win to receive reward. Minimum minus 500 odds required. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
All right, let's get to the voicemails. Who do we got here?
So I have a question. What do you think the chances are that the Red Sox do like a Garrett Crochet thing where they wait to at the trade deadline instead of getting him at the trade, or Joe Ryan is the player I'm talking about. Instead of getting him at the trade deadline, they wait till the off season. Because I know the White Sox wanted Roman Anthony at the trade deadline, and we were like, no, that's not going to happen. So we waited, and we still gave up a good prospect in Kyle Teal, but instead it's better than Roman Anthony. I know I thought that the Red Sox talked about giving up like a Peyton Tolley. What do you think instead of like later on, like in the offseason, they give like a Brandon Clark or a Mikey Romero? Just thinking your thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you for the voicemail. Again, it's very similar, right, with Crochet. Happened a couple of years ago, right? The White Sox, they were asking for the moon. They were trying to get a king's ransom, and no one took their bluff, right? No one fell for it. So this time around, now that you have more time, obviously, here's the thing about the deadline. And I know it's easy, at least to us, it all sounds easy to just be like, oh, come on, trade this guy, get a deal done, bada bing, bada boom. No. It's the deadline. You got 29 other teams making phone calls, busy phone lines, right? It's just a pain in the butt, right? The Twins, right? You got to think about it from the Twins, too. I mean, look at all the moves they made at the deadline. They were a busy team that day, right? And Joe Ryan, it was going to cost a lot to get him. There's a lot of players involved with that. It's just hard to get a deal done like that at the deadline. It can be done, but it's difficult when there's so much going on. The offseason, you just have more time. And that's where I wonder, that didn't seem to be a situation, at least for, maybe we ended up getting a report about the Ryan talks, but I don't know. I haven't seen anything yet saying they were looking for Roman and Marcelo, and I don't know. I think Peyton Tolley had come up in those conversations, but now that you just saw what Connolly Early did, I mean, could the Twins look at him and be like, oh, yeah. I mean, I could see the Twins wanting to get back pitching. I mean, that's just a natural thing you would want to get back in return, a good pitching prospect. Could it end up being Tolley or Early have to go back? I don't know. I mean, that's also another thing. Like, obviously, we were so excited about Tolley coming up this year. He had an amazing year in the minors this year, minor league pitcher of the year. But you wonder with how Early operated. I don't know, like, again, if you have to give up one of those guys, if the Twins were dead set, they needed Peyton Tolley, and with how Early performed, do the Red Sox maybe say, man, well, Early did really well. All right, we can get rid of Tolley. Again, I'm just wondering if that's how they could think. But then I could also see the Red Sox looking at Tolley, the big fastball, have a good offseason, work on the secondaries, and then they see more projection with Tolley. I wonder. Do they see a higher ceiling with him? It's going to be interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if one of those guys got moved. Early was so good. Now, Cora also talked about this. He talked about, let me find the quote. He talked about Early. I can't find it now. Of course, I closed out of it. Well, anyway, I can't find the quote. But Cora, he basically was giving Early a ton of praise for, pitching in Yankee Stadium, in that environment, in the postseason. He said he sees Early being a big contributor for next year. So I wonder, I just wonder what they do. But getting back to the voicemail, I mean, yeah, I could see one of those guys. I think, you mentioned Brandon Clark. I think he could be on the table. Mikey Romero, I could see him being on the table. I could see really anyone in that farm system being on the table. I really could at this point, But we'll see. But I think that's a good comparison that you made where the Crochet talks a couple of years ago, could you just come back to them? Yeah, I think you can. If you've already started that communication, that's why I think a Joe Ryan trade is a very real possibility. But you have to leave open the fact that other teams can call too, right? And a team like the Mets, they're going to look to add pitching, I think, this offseason. We had a couple of text messages. Let me take a look. Hi, Robbie. Hope you're doing well. You as well. Just curious. I don't have access to BTV. What do you see as an updated Joe Ryan package with the offseason upon us? I do think it's going to be similar to what you gave up for Crochet. It's 2 more years of control. I think Crochet probably ends up being a bit more expensive. But then again, he was coming off the Tommy John, so you factor in Joe Ryan's a 2. Crochet was coming off the surgery. He looked good, obviously, that year, but still, it was something to think about. I think they end up being around the same, personally. I think you're going to see a 4-for-1, maybe a 5-for-1, depending on the prospects. That's what I think. I do think one of those guys, Peyton Tolley or Early, would have to go back. I would just imagine, right? And then, we just talked about Brandon Clark a second ago. I mean, would the Red Sox actually send back like Kyson Witherspoon? I don't know. We just saw it last year with Brady Montgomery, right? He was included in the Crochet trade, who was just drafted. Do you send back Kyson Witherspoon, your first round pick? I don't know. That's a guy, if he does, I don't expect he's going to get moved. But that's a guy to look out for next year, right? I just think any of these guys could be on the table. Tolley, I don't know. I feel like they're very high on him. I mean, I think that's obvious. I don't know, man. Like Craig said, though, everything has to be on the table. We had a couple more here.
So I have a question. What do you think the chances are that the Red Sox do like a Garrett Crochet?
That one. I'd love to listen to the voicemail again, but I can't. We don't got enough time. But looking at where did my voicemails go? Oh, here we go. Do one more here. Hi, Robbie. I was wondering if Breslow did want to improve this team at the trade deadline due to the 24 deadline. Also, I will see if Breslow will be focused more on the lineup or the rotation. Could we see a trade for Mackenzie Gore? Oh, that's actually an interesting little factor there. Paul Tabani going to the Nationals. Maybe a little Mackenzie Gore. I don't know. I think Tabani, similar situation than with what we saw with Breslow in 2024. Remember, they didn't really do all that much. They brought in Giolito. I think this is going to be an evaluation year for the Nationals. I mean, maybe they could get aggressive. I mean, maybe he comes into the fold and says, all right, we need to make these moves. But usually when you see a guy get hired, they tend not to go crazy in the beginning, right? They tend to kind of feel things out. Got to think about what they have to do to improve the organization as a whole. So, I don't know. Would he trade away Mackenzie Gore right away? I mean, maybe. Right? You saw Chaim Bloom come into the fold, and they had to trade away Mookie. But with Gore, he's further away from free agency, but his value is high. So, I don't know. I just wonder what their approach is going to be. I think it's probably not likely Gore gets moved. It's just my thinking. I think if anything, they try to keep things intact and they try to make a few moves to add to the roster. We'll see. But that's an interesting perspective. One more here, and then we're going to wrap things up. If you could make any deal this offseason, trade or free agency, what would it be? If free agency, say the years and the money. And if trade, say the trade deal. You know, that's interesting. I wonder, what is more important? Is it a number 2 in the rotation? Or is it a middle of the order bat? I think that's a really good debate. I think most people will say both. But if you had to pick one, I mean, I don't know. I go by the old saying, pitching wins championships, pitching and defense. But, man, you really need another guy in the middle of that order. That's tough. I think you could see an argument for both sides because I think on the, you could argue that for the lineup, you do have good bats, but are any of those bats going to bring you good pop in the middle of that lineup? And on the pitching side of things, well, you just saw what Early did. Totally showed some promise. You have depth, but where would you like to really plug and play someone? I'd probably lean towards the 2, honestly, and then you just try to figure it out with the bats. I think both is the answer. You need to do something both spots, right? But we'll see. Brett, what do I think about Michael King? I don't know. I feel like King ends up staying with the Padres. He got hurt this year. He had a couple of different injuries. It's probably not a great year for him to go back out into the market. Just stay in San Diego for another year, boost your value back up, and then go back out to the offseason next year. That's the way I see it. So, everybody, I'm going to wrap it up right there. We have been here long enough for tonight. We had a lot to dive into here tonight. We had a lot of comments, a lot of possibilities to talk about. Anthony, what about Ranger Suarez? Here's the thing. I don't know. I want the Red Sox to go get like a good righty. I don't want to have like all these lefties. You got Crochet, Tolley, Early. What's going to happen with those guys? I want to just get a good righty. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't want to have too many lefties in here. Ranger Suarez, I wouldn't be upset if they got him, but I think personally for me, I'd rather get, and also another thing too, I'd rather get more of a swing and miss kind of a guy, right? You do need that at the top. You need that. Ryan is going to give you a bit more. Suarez, what was Suarez at this year? I believe he was in like the 8s or the 9s. Yeah, he was at 8.5, 8.6 per 9. Whereas with Ryan, he was a little over 10 per 9. Yeah, so I'd prefer Ryan. Sandy has shown that swing and miss ability in the past. He would actually be lower as of right now compared to Ranger Suarez. But with Sandy, I think he's on the uppity up. Had a good second half. I don't know. I think for me, Joe Ryan would be the guy. Dylan Cease, maybe, depending on what the contract would be. That's just what I think. So, and Christopher, Robbie, do you see us doing anything on the reliever market? I think they will, right? I believe Justin Wilson was only on a 1-year deal, right? Yeah, he's only on a 1-year deal. So, do they bring him back? Do they go for another lefty? Steven Matz, I think, is going to end up probably going elsewhere. They just brought him in to fortify the bullpen. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I would expect them to look at something for the bullpen as well. I'm out of here, everybody. Thank you for watching here tonight. We'll probably be back here Wednesday unless something happens tomorrow. But if you count on the way out, hit the like button for me. Subscribe if you're new. And if you are listening to the replays, have yourself a good day. Everyone here, live with me, go have yourself a good night. And we'll see you next time.